Welcome back to our series 2D Art to 3D Animation Snowy Intro. Now that we have our snowflakes, how do we actually create the scene? Well, not so fast. In this video, we will cover all the components used in the final animation and describe what the rules are. Stay tuned. Hey everyone, George from Bitulin here. This video is the third in our series 2D Art to 3D Animation Snowy Intro. Today we're going to describe all the components used in this scene and what the rules are. Let's get started. This video isn't your typical file new, delete the default cube, and create a scene as fast as we can how-to guide. We thought it'd be good to take a breather, step back, and actually think about what it is we're trying to accomplish, and then take a look at the components we use to ultimately render the final animation. With any project, you need to have the basic idea of the result you're looking for. The inspiration for this project came from the first few seconds of the classic Frosty the Snowman. As a reference, here's a freeze frame. It's a little grainy, but during the opening credits, they have snowflakes flying around the words. This led me to wonder what the animators would have done if they used the free tools we have available to us today. Disclaimer: the look and feel we're going for was more cartoony than realistic, and listen, it is by no means supposed to be a completed project. It is simply a foundation that hopefully some of you will use to create truly fantastic art. This scene is pretty simple. There are the snowflakes that we imported from the SVG files, the text that'll fade in, the planes that will emit snowflakes, the lights that will illuminate, and of course the camera. If you notice in the outliner panel, you'll see that I took the time to name the components and put them in collections within the hierarchy. This is a good pattern to follow. Even if the scene is relatively small, it allows us to easily find objects, especially if they're hidden or disabled, and to be able to toggle their visibility. For me personally, it keeps me focused on a single object until I'm ready for all of them to interact. With that said, something to remember is that if a component is hidden or excluded, it will not do its part in the scene. That means a light may not cast shadows, or a particle system might not produce snowflakes. So if this happens, just go up here and check in the outliner to make sure that things are visible and enabled. Let's start with the snowflakes. These are the three imported SVG files created in Affinity Designer. Each of them has some thickness and beveling applied. They are a simple white material. The reason that there are three is that there's some randomness to the snowflakes emitted by the particle systems. We probably could have got away with just one, since the snowflakes are rotating and floating around, so it's really hard to pick up their individual shapes enough to be able to tell if they're all the same. But since we have three SVG files, why not use them? They've been added to the snowflakes collection, and that's so that we can use them later on. Also note that these three instances aren't actually used in the animation, is that the particle systems will produce new instances of these as needed, so we can go ahead and just hide those for now. Let's take a look at the camera. It has been positioned to look straight down the y-axis. This is very similar to 2D animation and makes positioning of things in the scene pretty easy. We can do this because we don't have scenery and the desired look is just words floating in space. One other thing to note is that the camera has depth of field turn enabled, and the focus object is the text object. This means that things that are closer or farther will be blurry, and that will draw the eye of the watcher to the text. The next objects to look at are the two text objects. Let's go to camera view so we can see them better. These are just text objects, so it's just add text. You can use edit mode to edit the text. So I just go to edit mode and start typing. You can replace the text. So what we've done here is gone to, with them highlighted, gone to geometry, extruded them to give them a little depth, and then beveled them slightly just around the corner so they're not so sharp of an edge. These are standard objects, so you're allowed to rotate and scale and move them like any other object. So what we did this is rotated it 90 degrees around the X and then positioned them, both these and with the camera, to get it aligned exactly how we wanted it. What we wanted to do is have these texts fade in, and we wanted them to have a kind of a cloudy, icy feel, and just this one to be slightly more transparent. We did this both with materials using nodes. So let's go to the shader tab. So what we're going to do is not spend a lot of time on how to make something look icy. That would be in this group. There are many examples out in YouTube and on the internet that you can find these settings to make it look like ice. So we're not going to delve into that. What's more important for us is this mix shader and how we turn this from transparent to the shader. And that's done in this mix shader. And this mix shader has a keyable value that basically, the easiest way to think of it is when this is 1, 100% of this one, the lower one, is applied, and when this is 0, 100% of this is applied. So we start with it keyed at frame 0 with it at 1, which means all of this is applied. And with this being 255 pure white, it means that it's 100% transparent. So what happens is on frame 0, it's 100% transparent, and over here, suddenly if you watch the number, it starts to drop, and it goes all the way down to just 9.921. So what's occurring here is, at this point, suddenly there's a little bit of this showing, so it starts to show up and it's not 100% transparent. And then over the course of time, it keeps getting a little bit more of this applied than the transparent. And for this one, we stopped it at 0.921, and it continues then at 0.921. If we look at Snowy, it starts, the same thing starts as 1, but it starts a little earlier, being showing up on the screen, and we let that one run right to 0, so it's 100% ice, the ice shader. So that's how this works. In the next video, we might spend a little bit more time on this, but I thought it was more important to cover how to make something transparent, or how to get something to change color, or to transition between transparent and solid, translucent, all the complete infinite number of combinations, and then how to animate that over time. Okay, on to the planes that host the particle systems that produce the snowflakes. Let's go back to layout, and we'll take a look at our two planes. The first one is positioned in front, and the second one is positioned just behind the text. If you notice, it's a little longer in the X direction, and that's because when we look down the camera, we want to make sure the snowflakes are falling all the way to the side of the camera view and not just straight in the middle, which would have made it look like it was a cloud burst in the center. And also we made sure that both of these planes were out of view of the camera. So that way we didn't get the artifacts of the planes actually in it. We just wanted their snowflakes. So for each one we added a particle system. We added a back and a front particle system. We might have been able to get away with one, but we wanted to have the flexibility to change the settings like speed and angle between the two if need be. So the values for each that were important is on emission, the number. So we're going to produce 1,500 snowflakes over 800 frames, and we wanted them to survive all the way to the end, and that's because they float down and float up, and we wanted to make sure that they didn't die off. And so what would happen is they would just, after if we had this at 400, the ones that were produced at 0 would be gone, and some of that would be okay because they'd be low, but we didn't want them just to disappear while they happened to be in the camera view. So we just made that 800. Velocity. So this is the velocity at which they fall straight down, but gravity is adding to that, so we wanted that pretty small. This is how much to spin it off left and right and forward and back. So we played around with those numbers. We wanted them to rotate, so we didn't want them to just, we wanted them to rotate around their own axis. So we set that and we randomized it. Dynamic means is whether to use the rotation already assigned to the objects themselves, or dynamically meaning that they'll be the emitter in the particle system will determine the rotation. One other setting is down here under weights, field weights for gravity. We made this really low, and again is to control them so they're not falling so fast. They have an opportunity to be hit by to look like they're floating on the wind and rotating around and catching updrafts, and so by reducing this really low allows that to happen. If this goes up, they fall straight down like sleet, and we didn't want that look. Next is lighting. Lighting is very important to the overall feel of the scene. There are too many variables to cover in this video. What we did is we limited our use to just the basics, which are position, color, and strength. In this scene, we used 3 area lights, 2 from the front sides, 1 from the back, and a 4th spot straight down on the text. For each one, we added a constraint that forced it to track to the snowy text, so that way we could move these and position these and they were always shining directly at the text. We adjusted the colors and the strengths to get the desired effect of the solidness of this, as well as get the reflections off of the snowflakes as they fluttered around the scene. And again, lighting is critical to the feel of the scene, and it's a great place to experiment and read up on and maybe even take a course on, because it adds such a huge amount to every scene. Okay, so there's some final items to cover, and those are settings we'll start with the renderer. And so under the renderer, cycles, and if your device, your graphics card has a pretty powerful processor, go ahead and choose this. That'll allow you to do other things on your computer while it's processing, and it'll probably run faster. I'm going to go ahead and just be back in this so we can take a look. We have motion blur on, and so that means is as they move, you can see that it blurs them a little bit and it just makes them look more natural as they fly along. Again, you can play with that, decide if that's something that you like or not. One other thing is under color management. There's Filmic, which is more realistic filming or capturing. You might want to take a look at standard. It makes it more, I guess, cartoony than it is natural. And again, you can play around with those settings and decide for yourself which one works for you. Under output, we're not going to cover a lot under output because these values change depending upon which step you're doing, and in the next video we'll go through those two steps and what the settings should be for those steps. One thing to note though is that you have render region, and if you look here, the only thing that rendered by cycles was what was in the camera's view, and everything on the outside it didn't render, and so that might help speed up your render times. It's something to look at. So the next step is scene, and in scene, the only thing we played with or adjusted was to turn gravity on, and this is usually minus 9.8. We reduced it just a little bit, again, to help control how fast snowflakes were falling. Under world, we changed the background color to be a darker, colder blue, and that gives you the background that we were looking for. Again, trying to match that original scene. And so that's about it for all these settings. We will do a file new in the next video and go through and create these, but we'll probably do it pretty quickly. So we wanted this video to have a chance to kind of talk about the individual pieces before we just slapped them on us in the scene and went forward. Hey, thanks for watching, and remember to look in the description below for links to the other videos in the series. If you found this video helpful, please click on the like button below. And don't forget to subscribe. Take care and talk to you soon.